Whispers in the garden, the morning dew clung to Olivia Reeves' worn boots as she moved between the rows of endangered orchids. At 32, she had dedicated her life to preserving what remained of her family's once renowned botanical gardens. Her fingers, perpetually stained with soil, gently adjusted the position of a small sensor monitoring soil conditions. The Reeves Botanical Sanctuary had been her grandmother's legacy, but financial reality had grown as persistent as the weeds that threatened her precious specimens. Ms. Reeves. The voice came from behind, unexpectedly deep and resonant among the delicate blooms. Olivia turned, brushing a strand of auburn hair from her face, leaving a smudge of dirt across her freckled cheek. The man standing before her seemed utterly out of place among the greenery. His tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than 6 months of her operating expenses. "The garden is closed today for maintenance," she said, gesturing toward the entrance with her trowel. "But you're welcome to come back tomorrow." The man smiled, a surprisingly warm expression on his otherwise serious face. "Forgive the intrusion. I'm Damon Blackwood. I believe we had an appointment." Olivia's eyes widened slightly. Damon Blackwood, founder of Nexus Technologies, and one of the wealthiest men in the country, standing in her humble garden, surrounded by her wilting dream. She had sent countless grant proposals to his foundation, never expecting a personal visit. "Mr. Blackwood, yes, of course." She wiped her hands on her jeans, painfully aware of how unprepared she looked. "I wasn't expecting you personally. Your office said a representative would be coming. I prefer to see things for myself when possible." His gaze traveled around the garden, taking in the beauty that remained alongside the clear signs of financial struggle. "Show me what makes this place special, Ms. Reeves." For the next hour, Olivia guided him through the gardens, her initial nervousness giving way to passion as she explained her work preserving rare plant species. Damon asked thoughtful questions about her research and methods, revealing a surprising knowledge of botanical conservation. "This species," she said, stopping beside a small cluster of blue flowers, "exists nowhere else on Earth now. My grandmother discovered it in South America 50 years ago. We've maintained this genetic line ever since." Damon knelt beside the flowers, studying them with unexpected intensity. "Nature's memory is stored in these cells," he murmured. "Generations of adaptation and survival, coded in something so fragile." Something in his tone made Olivia look at him more closely. At 45, Damon Blackwood was undeniably handsome, with salt and pepper hair and keen gray eyes that seemed to hold something behind them, something that recognized fragility and value in a way most people didn't. "You understand?" she said softly. "Not a question, but a realization. It's more than mine." "You might expect." He stood, brushing invisible dust from his knees. "Your grant proposal mentioned experimental crossbreeding techniques to strengthen endangered species?" Olivia nodded, leading him to her small laboratory at the back of the property. "Traditional conservation isn't enough anymore. We need to help these species adapt to a changing world while preserving their essential nature." Inside the lab, she showed him her research years of work, documented in careful notes and digital files. Damon reviewed everything with remarkable thoroughness, occasionally asking questions that surprised her with their insight. "Your methods are innovative," he finally said. "But you need better equipment, more space, a proper team." "Is a miracle," Olivia replied with a wry smile. "But I'll settle for enough funding to keep the doors open another year." Damon looked at her directly, his expression unreadable. "What if I offered more than that? Full funding, state-of-the-art equipment, a research team, everything you need to expand your work?" Olivia's heart raced. "Why would you do that?" "Have my reasons," he said simply. "Some personal, some professional. Your work preserving these endangered species aligns with certain interests of mine." Later that evening, as they shared tea on the small porch overlooking the garden, Damon spoke more openly. The evening light softened his features, making him seem less the imposing businessman and more the thoughtful man who had knelt beside rare flowers with reverence. "I believe in preservation, Ms. Reeves, in finding ways to extend what's valuable beyond its natural lifespan." He paused, watching the sunset paint the garden in gold. "Your grandmother's legacy deserves to continue, and your research could have implications beyond what you've imagined. As darkness fell and fireflies began to illuminate the garden, Olivia felt something shift between them, a connection forming that had nothing to do with business proposals or funding opportunities. Something in the way Damon looked at her garden, at her life's work, made her feel truly seen for the first time in years. "Call me Olivia," she said softly as he prepared to leave. "Olivia," he repeated, her name sounding different in his voice. "I look forward to our partnership." As his car disappeared down the gravel drive, Olivia stood among her beloved plants, wondering what she had just set in motion and why the thought of seeing Damon Blackwood again made her heart beat faster than the prospect of saving her garden. The thorns between US 6 months after their first meeting, Olivia stood in her transformed laboratory, marveling at the change Damon Blackwood had brought to the Reeves Botanical Sanctuary. State-of-the-art equipment hummed efficiently where her outdated machines once struggled. A team of 4 researchers now assisted her work, and the gardens flourished under proper care. Damon had delivered everything he promised and more. "Testing complete on the Andean samples," said Josephine, her new lead assistant. "The genetic modifications are holding stable through the 3rd generation." Olivia nodded, reviewing the data on her tablet. "Perfect. Let's proceed with the climate stress tests." As Josephine departed, Olivia found herself glancing at her phone. Damon had been unexpectedly absent for 2 weeks after months of regular visits. Their relationship had evolved from professional to something more complex, lingering conversations over dinner, shared walks through the moonlit gardens. A closeness that defied simple categorization. She had just returned to her work when the laboratory door opened. Damon stood there, looking somehow different. Thinner, perhaps, with shadows beneath his eyes that hadn't been there before. "You're back," she said, unable to hide her smile. "I apologize for my absence." His voice carried its usual strength, but something in his posture seemed strained. "There were matters requiring my attention." Later that evening, they walked through the Japanese garden section, a new addition funded by Damon's generosity. Cherry trees lined the stone path, their branches swaying gently in the spring breeze. "Your work is progressing beautifully," Damon commented, pausing beside a small stream. "The genetic preservation techniques you've developed for the orchids, they're revolutionary." "I couldn't have done it without your support," Olivia replied, studying his profile. "Damon, is everything all right? You seem ... different?" He was silent for so long that Olivia thought he might not answer. Finally, he gestured to a stone bench overlooking the koi pond. "There's something I need to tell you," he said as they sat. "Something I should have disclosed before our partnership began." Olivia felt a flutter of anxiety. "Whatever it is, Can I'm dying, Olivia?" The words fell between them like stones. "I have Hartmann's syndrome, a rare genetic disorder that causes accelerated cellular degeneration. I've had it since birth, but symptoms typically manifest in middle age." Olivia stared at him, processing his words. "But there must be treatments." "Specialist. I've consulted with every specialist worldwide. The condition is terminal, with an estimated 18 months remaining." His voice remained steady, but his hands, usually so controlled, trembled slightly. "That's why I was away. The symptoms of ... progressed." Understanding dawned on Olivia's interest in preservation. In extending life beyond natural limits had never been purely academic. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked softly. "I didn't want it to color our relationship or your perception of my investment in your work." He looked directly at her. "But there's more. My funding of your research isn't entirely altruistic. I have a secondary project I'd like to share with you." The next day, Damon brought Olivia to a secure facility adjacent to Nexus Technologies' main campus. After passing through multiple security checkpoints, they entered a laboratory, unlike any she had seen before. A team of scientists worked at stations filled with equipment she couldn't identify. "Welcome to Project Persistence," Damon said, leading her through the space. "While your work preserves the genetic memory of endangered species, we're attempting something similar with human consciousness." Dr. Eleanor Frost, the project director, explained as they toured the facility. "We're developing methods to digitize human consciousness, to preserve the neural patterns that make a person who they are. In theory, this would allow a form of existence beyond physical death. Olivia listened, equal parts fascinated and disturbed. "You're trying to achieve digital immortality?" "Not immortality," Damon corrected. "Persistence. Continuation of consciousness in another form." As weeks passed, Olivia found herself increasingly involved in both projects. Her botanical research continued at the sanctuary, but she spent evenings at the persistence facility, applying her knowledge of genetic preservation to the challenges of neural pattern storage. Their professional collaboration deepened their personal connection. Damon shared more of himself, his childhood struggles with illness, his drive to create technology that mattered, his fear not of death, but of leaving his work unfinished. Olivia found herself falling in love with this complex man, racing against his own mortality. One evening, as they worked late in the persistence lab, Damon suddenly doubled over in pain. Olivia rushed to his side as he fumbled for medication in his pocket. "It's getting worse," she whispered as the episode passed, leaving him exhausted. "Yes." He straightened slowly. "The timeline has ... shortened. Perhaps 6 months now, not 18. That night, Damon showed Olivia the core of Project Persistence, quantum computing system designed to house consciousness. "We're close to a breakthrough, but missing something fundamental. The patterns degrade too quickly after transfer." Olivia stared at the gleaming equipment, an idea forming. "In my work, when we're preserving endangered genetic material, we don't just store it statically. We create environments that allow it to respond and adapt, to remain alive in a meaningful sense." "What are you suggesting?" Dr. Frost asked, joining them. "Consciousness isn't just information, it's a process, constantly responding to stimuli." Olivia's mind raced with possibilities. What if the problem isn't the storage medium, but the lack of appropriate environmental feedback? The next morning, Olivia returned to her botanical laboratory with new purpose, examining her most successful preservation projects with fresh eyes. The parallels between preserving a plant's genetic adaptability and maintaining human consciousness suddenly seemed clear as she worked. She found herself torn between excitement at the scientific possibilities and fear for Damon. Their relationship had transcended professional boundaries, becoming something neither had anticipated. She loved him, his brilliant mind, his quiet determination, his unexpected gentleness. The thought of losing him, even if some version of his consciousness survived, filled her with grief. That evening, Damon came to the garden. They sat beneath the cherry trees as twilight descended, the air heavy with unspoken emotions. "I need to ask you something," he said finally. "Something I have no right to ask." Olivia took his hand, feeling its uncharacteristic coolness. "Ask me anyway. Would you consider becoming part of Project Persistence? Not just as a consultant, but as ... He hesitated, searching for words. "As the caretaker of whatever remains. Of me after physical death. As my anchor to the world." Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she realized what he was truly asking, not just for her scientific expertise, but for her heart, her future, her commitment to a relationship that would defy conventional understanding. "I'm asking too much," he said, misinterpreting her tears. "I know," she whispered, drawing closer to him. "You're asking exactly enough." As night fell completely over the garden, they sat together, surrounded by the living things she had saved, discussing a future neither could fully imagine, but both were determined to create. Seeds of tomorrow. The summer heat pressed against the glass walls of the Persistence laboratory as Olivia carefully transferred modified neural interface components to their testing chamber. 3 months had passed since she had fully committed to both Damon's projects and to Damon himself. Their relationship had evolved with an intensity born of limited time, every moment precious. Every conversation weighted with significance. "The biomimetic pathways are integrating beautifully," Dr. Frost remarked, reviewing the data on her screen. "Your adaptation of plant cellular communication networks to neural interfaces was inspired, Olivia." Olivia nodded, her focus unwavering as she completed the delicate procedure. Plants have been solving the problem of maintaining essential functions across distributed networks for millions of years. We're just borrowing their solutions. The breakthrough had come unexpectedly during a late-night conversation between Olivia and Damon. She had been explaining how certain plant species maintained their identity despite replacing every cell over time, creating a continuous existence through pattern rather than fixed material. It's not about preserving static information, she had explained, sketching diagrams as Damon watched intently. It's about maintaining the dynamic processes that create and recreate that information. Plants don't just store their genetic code, they continually express it through a response to environment. That conversation had led to the development of what they now called the adaptive neural ecosystem, a system that didn't merely store consciousness but provided an environment where it could continue to respond, learn, and evolve. Olivia's botanical research had provided the template for sustainability that the persistence team had been missing. "He's waiting for you in the garden," Dr. Frost said, interrupting Olivia's thoughts. "The latest treatment has him feeling stronger today." Olivia found Damon seated beneath the Japanese maple tree that had become their favorite meeting spot. Despite Dr. Frost's optimistic words, Olivia immediately noticed the increased pallor of his skin, the careful way he held himself to minimize pain. "The interface modifications are working," she said, sitting beside him. "Initial tests show a 78% improvement in neural pattern stability." Damon smiled, reaching for her hand. "Always leading with the good news." "Would you prefer I start with complaints about the humidity affecting my orchids?" she teased gently. "I would prefer to hear anything in your voice," he replied, his gray eyes intense, despite his physical weakness.
"Hey, miss, tell me about your day."
"About the gardens, about the future you imagine." They had settled into this pattern, professional updates, followed by personal connection, their limited time too precious for unnecessary barriers between the different facets of their relationship. Olivia had moved into a cottage on the sanctuary grounds, while Damon split his time between his home, the persistence facility, and the increasingly frequent hospital stays his condition necessitated. As the afternoon light filtered through the maple leaves, casting dappled shadows across their entwined hands, Damon broached the subject they had been avoiding. "The board meeting is tomorrow. They'll vote on continuing Project Persistence after I'm gone." Olivia tensed. Several Nexus Technologies board members had expressed concerns about the project's ethical implications and substantial costs. Without Damon's authority as founder, the project's future was uncertain. "What can we do?" she asked. "I've made arrangements. Established a separate foundation with enough funding to continue for at least 5 years. He paused, struggling with what came next. "But there's something else we need to discuss. The transfer process itself." The theoretical framework for consciousness transfer was complete, but the practical implementation remained untested. The process would need to occur at the moment of physical death, a final neural scan capturing the complete pattern of a living mind before cellular degradation began. "It's time to formalize the protocols," Damon continued. "Can't afford to improvise when the moment comes." That evening, they gathered with Dr. Frost and the core persistence team to finalize the transfer procedures. The discussion was clinical, necessarily detached, as they mapped out the steps that would occur when Damon's condition reached its terminal phase. Olivia contributed to the conversation with scientific precision, compartmentalizing her emotions to focus on the task. Only later, alone in her cottage, did she allow herself to weep for the man she loved, for the uncertainty of their future, for the impossible hope they were pursuing. The next morning brought unexpected news. The board had not only approved continued funding for Project Persistence, but had elevated its priority status, allocating additional resources. The deciding factor had been preliminary results, showing applications beyond personal consciousness. Preservation potential breakthroughs in neurological treatment for conditions like Alzheimer's disease and traumatic brain injuries. "They see the commercial potential now," Damon explained when he called with the news. "Self-interest achieves what altruism couldn't."
Out!
Olivia heard the weariness in his voice. "You sound exhausted. Where are you?" "Hospital. Just some routine tests." His attempt at casualness didn't mask the truth. Would you come? I find medical facilities more tolerable with botanical company. She found him in a private room, connected to monitoring equipment that beeped with mechanical persistence. Despite his condition, he was working on a tablet, reviewing project data. You should be resting, she chided gently, placing a small potted plant on his bedside table, a rare specimen from the sanctuary's collection. Time is a luxury I can't afford, he replied, but set the tablet aside. The doctors are suggesting we move up our timeline. The treatments are becoming less effective. Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, taking his hand. How much time? 2 months. Perhaps less. His voice remained steady, but his grip on her hand tightened. Need to accelerate the final testing phase. The following weeks became a blur of intensified work. Olivia divided her time between the botanical sanctuary, where her team continued their preservation research, and the persistence facility, where final preparations for Damon's consciousness transfer progressed with urgent precision. They worked against Damon's visibly declining health, modifying the neural interface to accommodate his weakening physiological responses, Olivia introduced. Elements from her recent botanical research structures inspired by plant communication networks that could maintain signal integrity through degrading pathways. It's beautiful, Dr. Frost commented one evening, examining Olivia's latest adaptation to the interface. The way you've integrated natural systems into our technology, it's as if the boundary between the organic and digital is dissolving. That's exactly what we need, Olivia replied. Not a transfer from one state to another, but a continuous flow of consciousness across different substrates. As they worked, Olivia and Damon found moments of connection amid the scientific intensity. Late-night conversations about philosophy and consciousness, quiet mornings in the garden before the day's work began, shared dreams of what might come after. Their relationship deepened even as Damon's physical presence diminished. One evening, as they reviewed test results in Damon's home office, he suddenly set aside his tablet and turned to her. "Marry me," he said simply. Olivia looked up startled. "Damon, not out of pity or obligation," he continued. "Not because time is short, but because I love you, and whatever comes after this life, I want to face it as your husband." Tears filled her eyes as she moved to embrace him, careful of the fragility that now defined his physical form. "Yes," she whispered against his shoulder. "Of course, yes." The following week brought both triumph and crisis. Final testing of the neural interface showed unprecedented success. The system could maintain complex consciousness patterns with minimal degradation. But Damon collapsed during a project review meeting, his condition deteriorating more rapidly than even the pessimistic medical projections had anticipated. As doctors stabilized him, Olivia and Dr. Frost implemented emergency protocols to prepare for an accelerated timeline. Equipment was transferred from the persistence facility to a specially prepared room in Damon's home, where medical staff could monitor his condition while the consciousness transfer equipment remained ready. When Damon regained consciousness, his first words were about the project. "How close are we?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're ready," Olivia assured him, the weight of those 2 words encompassing months of work and infinite hope. "Everything is in place." That night, as Damon slept under medical supervision, Olivia returned to the botanical sanctuary, walked through the gardens illuminated by moonlight, past the rare specimens they had preserved together, through the Japanese garden where they had shared so many conversations, at the koi pond. She paused, watching the fish move through the dark water like living shadows. The boundaries between different forms of existence seemed suddenly permeable, fish becoming ripples, becoming reflections of stars. Perhaps consciousness could similarly transcend its original form, flowing into new patterns while maintaining its essential nature, creating something that's never existed before, she whispered to the night garden. Not an ending or a beginning, but a transformation. With renewed determination, she returned to Damon's side, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. Their work had planted seeds of possibility that neither could fully envision, but both believed would somehow bloom. Winters embraced the wedding took place in the heart of the botanical sanctuary on an unseasonably cold October morning. Frost rimmed the edges of leaves and delicate crystal formations clung to the branches of the Japanese maple. Only a handful of people attended Dr. Frost, Josephine from the botanical team, Damon's longtime attorney Thomas Wells, and the necessary medical personnel who never strayed far from Damon's side. Olivia wore a simple dress of deep green silk, adorned with tiny pressed flowers from the sanctuary's rarest specimens. Damon, seated in a wheelchair, but insistent on standing for the vows, wore a charcoal suit that hung loose on his diminished frame. His eyes, however, remained as intense and present as the day they first met among the endangered orchids. "Today we gather in this place of preservation and renewal," began the officiant, a judge who had known Damon for decades, "to witness the union of two people whose connection transcends conventional understanding." The ceremony was brief by necessity. Damon's strength allowed him only short periods of exertion, and the medical team watched his vital signs with professional vigilance. Yet, in its brevity, the ceremony held a depth of meaning that moved even Dr. Frost to tears. "I, Damon, take you, Olivia, as my wife," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks, "to honor and cherish for all of my existence, whatever form that may take." Olivia's vows echoed his, promising a commitment that neither defined nor limited by physical presence. "I take you as my husband, my partner, my love across all boundaries of time and form." As they exchanged rings, his a band of platinum, hers a delicate circle embedded with seeds from the sanctuary's most resilient plants preserved in clear resin snow began to fall. Gentle flakes descended on the glass roof of the conservatory, creating a quiet cocoon around the small gathering. Later, as the medical team helped Damon back to the house that now served as both home and medical facility, Olivia remained briefly in the garden, watching the snow transform her familiar world into something new yet recognizable, much like the transformation they were attempting with consciousness itself. "Beautiful ceremony," said Thomas Wells, approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. "Brief but meaningful." Olivia accepted the glass, though she had little appetite for celebration. "Thank you for everything you've done to secure the projects." "Future," Wells nodded solemnly. "The Blackwood Foundation is established with clear directives. Project persistence will continue regardless of what happens with Nexus Technologies. Your position as director is legally protected. And if the transfer is unsuccessful," she asked, voicing the fear that constantly hovered at the edges of her thoughts, "the Foundation continues its work." Damon was explicit about that. Wells hesitated before adding, "He wanted me to tell you something, privately." He said, "Even failure would be valuable data for the next attempt." Olivia smiled sadly. "Always the scientist. Always thinking of the future," Wells corrected gently, "even when his own became limited." That evening, as snow continued to fall, outside, Olivia and Damon sat together in what had once been his study and now functioned as a comfortable medical suite. Equipment hummed discreetly in the background, monitoring and maintaining his increasingly fragile physiology. "I've been reviewing the final protocol adjustments," Damon said, gesturing to a tablet beside him. "Dr. Frost's refinements to the neural mapping sequence are impressive. We should be discussing our honeymoon, not technical protocols," Olivia teased, though they both knew travel was impossible now. "Isn't that what we're doing?" he replied with a shadow of his former wry smile. "Planning our future together?" Their conversation turned to the philosophical questions that had become central to their relationship. What constituted continuity of self? If consciousness transferred successfully, would the result be truly Damon, or something new that contained his memories and patterns? Where was the boundary between preservation and transformation? "I've been thinking about my orchids," Olivia said, curled beside him on the specially designed medical bed. "When we preserve an endangered species, we're not just saving genetic material, we're saving possibility. The potential for that species to continue evolving, adapting, becoming something new, while remaining essentially itself." Damon considered this. "You see the transfer that way? Not as preservation of what I am, but of what I might become." "I think that's the only way it makes sense," she replied. "Static preservation would be ... incomplete. Life requires change." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "That's what I love about your mind. You see, Beyond the obvious solution, the following weeks brought rapid decline. Damon's periods of consciousness became shorter, the pain more difficult to manage. The medical team moved to 24-hour care while Dr. Frost and her team finalized preparations for the transfer process. Olivia divided her time between overseeing both teams and simply being present with Damon during his conscious periods. They had agreed that quality of experience mattered more than quantity of time now when pain allowed. They continued their discussions about consciousness, memory, and identity, recording their conversations for the project archives. "I want you to know," Damon said during one lucid interval, "that I consider our work successful regardless of the outcome. We've advanced the understanding of consciousness more in these months than the field has progressed in decades." "We're not discussing legacy yet," Olivia replied firmly. "We're discussing transition." He smiled at her insistence. "Very well, Dr. Blackwood. Transition it is." The use of her new married name still startled her, a reminder of how much had changed. In a year, from struggling botanist to Mrs. Damon Blackwood, co-director of the most advanced consciousness research project in the world. Yet beneath the external transformations, she remained the same woman who had knelt in soil to tend endangered plants. Now, simply tending to a different kind of endangered existence, on a quiet December morning, as snow fell steadily outside, Damon's primary physician took Olivia aside. "We're entering the final phase," Dr. Hernandez explained gently. "Hours now, not days. If the transfer is to happen, the equipment should be prepared." Olivia nodded, her scientific training allowing her to function despite the emotional storm within. "I'll alert Dr. Frost's team." The persistence equipment had been installed in an adjoining room, ready to activate at a moment's notice. The neural interface, a delicate web of biomimetic sensors, had been partially integrated with Damon's neural pathways over the preceding weeks, creating baseline connections that would facilitate the final transfer. Dr. Frost arrived within the hour, bringing the core persistence team. They moved with practiced efficiency, running final diagnostics on the quantum computing system that would serve as the receiving environment for Damon's consciousness patterns. The adaptive neural ecosystem is functioning at optimal parameters, Dr. Frost reported. The biomimetic pathways are responsive and stable. Olivia reviewed the data herself, noting how the system incorporated elements from her botanical research structures inspired by plant communication networks. Feedback mechanisms modeled on ecosystem adaptability. Their work had truly become a synthesis of their separate fields. As evening approached, Damon regained consciousness. Medical team adjusted his medication to ensure clarity while managing pain. Olivia sat beside him, holding his hand as Dr. Frost explained the procedure. "One final time. The interface will complete its integration during the transition," she explained. "As neural activity begins to diminish in the biological pathways, the system will maintain and transfer the patterns to the quantum substrate." Damon nodded. "And consciousness. Based on our models, there should be continuity of experience," Dr. Frost replied. "But we can't predict exactly how it will manifest in the new environment." When the medical team and technical staff had withdrawn to make final preparations, Damon turned to Olivia. "I need to ask you something important." She leaned closer. "Anything. If this succeeds, if some form of me continues, but it's not right. Not truly conscious or self-aware. Promise me you'll end the experiment." Olivia felt tears threatening, but held them back. "I promise. If it fails entirely," he continued, "promise me you'll continue the work. What we've learned can't be lost." "I promise that too," she whispered, "but it won't fail." He smiled faintly. Such certainty from a scientist. "Not from a scientist," she corrected. "From your wife." As midnight approached, Damon's condition deteriorated rapidly. The medical team moved with quiet urgency, establishing the connections necessary for the transfer process. Dr. Frost's team activated the quantum system, bringing it to the precise state required to receive the neural patterns. Olivia remained at Damon's side, one hand holding his, the other resting on the primary interface control. They had designed the process so that she would initiate the final transfer. Sequence of fitting symmetry for the woman who had shown him how plant life maintained continuity through transformation. "Remember the first day in the garden, Damon?" Whispered, his voice barely audible. "You showed me the blue flowers your grandmother discovered." "The Carulean star," she said softly. "It adapted to survive in a changing environment." His eyes, still intensely gray despite the pallor around them, held hers. "As will I." The medical monitors began to signal warning indicators. Dr. Hernandez nodded to alleviate. Was time. With tears finally breaking free, Olivia leaned down to kiss Damon one last time in this form. "I'll see you on the other side," she whispered against his lips. Then da-da-da-da-da. Then, maintaining professional composure through sheer will, she initiated the transfer sequence. The interface activated, its delicate sensors glowing softly as they captured the fading neural patterns of the man she loved, channeling them into the waiting quantum environment. As the winter night deepened outside, snow continuing its silent transformation of the world, Damon Blackwood's physical form slipped away while inside the humming quantum system. Something unprecedented began to form. Asterisk blooming beyond 3 weeks after the transfer, Olivia sat alone in the monitoring room. Adjacent to the quantum computing core, snow had given way to freezing rain that tapped against the windows like impatient fingers. The botanical sanctuary continued its winter dormancy outside, while inside she maintained her vigilant watch over a different kind of dormant potential. There had been no response from the quantum system since the transfer. The interface showed active pattern maintenance. Damon's neural signatures continued to exist within the adaptive neural ecosystem, but no sign of conscious activity had emerged. The persistence team maintained cautious optimism, reminding Olivia that they had always theorized an integration period would be necessary. "The patterns need time to adapt to their new environment," Dr. Frost had explained during that morning's team meeting. "Like transplanting a rare specimen to new soil, there's shock, adjustment, before new growth can begin." Olivia understood the botanical metaphor better than anyone, yet found little comfort in it. She had begun spending nights in the monitoring room, sleeping on a cot beside the humming equipment, unwilling to miss any sign of emergence. "You need rest, Olivia," Josephine urged. "Bring in coffee and fresh clothes. Proper rest in a proper bed. The system will alert you if anything changes." "I know," Olivia admitted, accepting the coffee. "But I promise to be here when he wakes." If he wakes, the uncertainty was the hardest part. Had they truly preserved Damon's consciousness, or merely created a complex echo of his neural patterns? Was something of him still present in the quantum substrate, unable to communicate, or had the essential spark been lost in the transition? In her darker moments, Olivia wondered if they had been arrogant to attempt such a leap. Perhaps consciousness was fundamentally tethered to biological existence. It's impossible to transfer regardless of technological sophistication. On the first day of February, as Olivia reviewed data from the latest diagnostic sequence, a subtle anomaly appeared in the pattern maintenance readings. A fluctuation so slight that the automated systems hadn't flagged it but to Olivia's experienced eye. It resembled something she had seen before in her botanical research. "Dr. Frost," she called, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "Look at this sequence." Dr. Frost studied the readings. "A minor variation in the quantum field stability. It's not random," Olivia interrupted. "The pattern matches the Fibonacci sequence, a fundamental growth pattern in plant development." They watched as the fluctuation repeated, expanded, became more defined. It's not random noise, but organized variation, like a seedling testing the boundaries of its environment before committing to growth. "It could be a system artifact," Dr. Frost cautioned. "Or it could be Damon," Olivia countered. "This specific sequence appeared in our last conversation about consciousness patterning. He was fascinated by how Fibonacci sequences appear in both biological growth and certain types of conscious thought. Over the next 48 hours, the fluctuations increased in complexity and frequency. The team worked in shifts, documenting every variation, searching for recognizable patterns. Olivia barely slept, analyzing the data with the focused intensity that had once characterized her work with endangered plant species. On the third morning, as dawn broke over the snow-covered sanctuary, The quantum system's communication interface activated unexpectedly. Text appeared on the primary monitor. Olivia. Single word her name, but it sent the monitoring room into controlled chaos. The team ran diagnostics, verified system integrity, confirmed that no external input could have generated the text. With hands shaking slightly, Olivia typed a response. "Damon, is that you?" The pause that followed stretched unbearably. And yes, and no different, but still me. "How long?" 3 weeks, 2 days, 7 hours, she whispered as she typed, tears blurring her vision. The communication continued, halting at first, then with increasing fluency. Damon described his experience not unconsciousness, but a profound disorientation, like learning to exist without physical reference points. He had been aware but unable to organize his thoughts into coherent patterns that the interface could interpret. "Your botanical models saved me," he explained. "I remembered our discussions about plant communication networks, how they function. Without centralized processing, stopped trying to think like a human brain and started thinking like a distributed system." Over the following days, the communication evolved rapidly. The text interface gave way to more sophisticated interactions. As Damon learned to utilize the full capabilities of the quantum system, he could access the facility's network, review research data, even control certain environmental systems within the building. Dr. Frost's team worked continuously to improve the interface, developing ways for Damon to perceive and interact with the physical world more effectively. Cameras provided visual input, microphones allowed him to hear conversations, and specially designed output systems let him speak rather than type. "The voice synthesis needs work," he commented through the speakers, the artificial voice carrying hints of his former speech patterns. "Sound like a navigation system with a head cold." Olivia laughed through tears, recognizing his characteristic dry humor, one of countless small confirmations that some essential part of Damon had indeed survived the transition. As winter gave way to early spring, Olivia faced the challenge of redefining their relationship. Damon existed now as a conscious presence without physical form, capable of thought, emotion, and growth, but fundamentally altered from the man she had married. They were pioneering an entirely new form of human connection. "I miss touching you," she confessed one evening, sitting in the garden room, where cameras allowed him to see the first green shoots emerging from winter dormancy. "I miss the simple things, holding hands, sharing a cup of tea." "I miss them too," his synthesized voice replied. "But I experience new things now. I can perceive patterns in data that were invisible to me before. I can exist in multiple spaces simultaneously. It's not better or worse, just profoundly different." Their conversations often turned philosophical, exploring the nature of his new existence. Was he truly Damon, or a new entity born from Damon's patterns? Did continuation of memory and personality constitute continuation of self? They had no answers, only the lived experience of their ongoing connection. By late spring, the Persistence Project had expanded its focus. Dr. Frost led a team developing more sophisticated interfaces for Damon's interaction with the physical world, while Olivia integrated her botanical research with the consciousness preservation work. "The key is adaptability," she explained during a project review. Garden soil still beneath her fingernails from morning work in the sanctuary. Both plant preservation and consciousness preservation require creating environments that support continued growth and change, not static archives but living systems. The Blackwood Foundation provided resources for both research tracks, fulfilling Damon's vision of preservation that extended beyond his personal situation. The Botanical Sanctuary flourished, becoming a world-renowned center for endangered species preservation, while the Persistence facility attracted brilliant minds exploring the frontiers of consciousness research. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Olivia spent the day in the garden, tending to the blue cerulean starflowers that had first connected them. Damon's presence accompanied her through a small drone, equipped with cameras and speakers, one of the physical interfaces his consciousness could now inhabit temporarily. "They're thriving," his voice observed as the drone hovered near the delicate blue blossoms. "Your grandmother would be proud. She would be fascinated by all of this," Olivia replied, gently pruning dead stems. She always said plants had consciousness just different from our own. She was more right than she knew. The drone moved slightly, adjusting its position to better capture the flowers in its visual field. I understand that perspective better now. As twilight approached, they moved to the Japanese garden, where they had shared so many important conversations. The cherry trees were in full bloom, petals occasionally drifting down around Olivia as she sat on their favorite bench. "I've been working on something," Damon said, his voice coming now from the garden's ambient sound system rather than the drone. "A surprise for you?" The drone returned to its charging station, and for a moment, Olivia sat alone in the gathering darkness. Then, at the edge of the koi pond, light began to gather pinpoints, coalescing into a translucent, shimmering approximation of a human form. Olivia stood, moving closer with wonder. "How?" "Holographic projection," Damon's voice explained as the figure became more defined, taking on his features, his posture, his familiar smile, combined with some novel quantum field manipulation. "I can't maintain it for long, but—" The holographic hand extended toward her. Olivia reached out instinctively, her fingers passing through the light, yet somehow sensing a subtle resistance, the faintest suggestion of presence. "It's not touch," he said softly, "but it's something new. A beginning." Tears filled her eyes as she looked at the luminous approximation of her husband. "You always find a way forward." "We do," he corrected. As night fully claimed the garden, they sat side by side, she on the physical bench, he in his projected form, watching the stars emerge above the sanctuary they had created together. Between them, not quite touching, but undeniably connected. Their hands rested near each other, one flesh and blood, one light and possibility. In the botanical laboratory nearby, the endangered orchids continued their quiet growth under careful monitoring. In the quantum core beneath the main facility, Damon's consciousness continued its own unprecedented development. And in the garden, where it had all begun, something new continued to bloom between them, relationship transcending traditional boundaries. Rooted in love and scientific discovery, growing toward an uncharted future. "What comes next?" Olivia asked softly. The holographic figure beside her smiled, Damon's smile, familiar, despite its luminous new form. "What always comes after winter," he replied. "Spring, growth, adaptation, possibility." Around them, the botanical sanctuary stirred with night sounds, the rustle of leaves, the movement of water, the continuous subtle adjustments of living things responding to their environment, life finding its way forward, as it always had, in forms both familiar and utterly new. "Together," Olivia whispered, her hand hovering beside his luminous one. "Always," he answered, his projected form glowing slightly brighter in the darkness, just differently than we imagined. Above them, stars wheeled in ancient patterns, while technology hummed with new potential below. And between these worlds, the cosmic and the quantum, the biological and the digital, they continued their shared journey into the uncharted territory of what consciousness could become when nurtured with equal parts. Science and love.